Hello, beautiful people. You're listening to the Communal Table Podcast, part of Food and Wine Pro. I'm your host, Kat Kinsman, and my guest today is the incredible Jamila Robinson. And I have wanted to, as soon as we knew we were doing this podcast, I think I asked her the first day to do this. As soon as I met her, she revealed herself to me as someone with just so much experience, layers, depth, a brain that can do things that mine absolutely can't. At the time, it was manifesting at when she was the senior content strategist for the USA Today networks, and she now is the creative. She is the editorial director of Atlantic 57, the creative division of the Atlantic. And you might not have heard her name before. That's because she is behind the scenes doing all the work. She's not a chef, but she has probably had more influence on what you've cooked and how you've eaten than most people out there. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you. You're just one of my favorite people. So to be sitting across from you, there may be tears.
I fully expect, same back at you, because we have, it's funny, we haven't gotten to spend a whole lot of time in person together, but I feel like we've had so many in-depth conversations via DM,
or it's always at the James Beard Awards, or maybe has been at the Atlanta Food and Wine Festival, where we're just chatting and talking about food and talking about life and discovering how that intersects with everything we do.
Yeah, and the thing is, we go deep pretty fast on this, and I really love that you are willing to reveal so much about yourself to me, and then increasingly to the world, about just everything that you're dealing with on all different levels and stuff, and that really opens up a pathway for people to talk about a whole lot of different kind of things. So let's, there are so many places we could begin, but let's talk about your time with USA Today and what you're doing and how you influence food culture there.
Sure. So my time at the USA Today Network, hi everybody, as a senior content strategist, and a lot of people try to figure out what does that mean. And there's an intersection of how we take content and we send it to other places. So how do we think about not only the key topics that we want to cover, but also how our audiences experience that information? So being able to figure out, is that on Instagram? Is that on WhatsApp? Is that on Snapchat? Is it in video? Is it on OTT podcasts? Thinking about how we take our content and take the stories that we develop and build them and take them to other places, bring them to audiences, whether that might be a live event, and developing that in the story inception. So thinking about, we want to write about food. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to be writing about it from the environment, from an environmental standpoint? So we need to go and do environmental forums on policy, or are we going to be doing hands and pans video?
Right.
And we need to build a studio so that we can show people how to do that. And we know that audiences may just want to watch those videos. They may not want to create those recipes. But then from another standpoint, well, what are people cooking? What are the trends? And then how do we not only teach people how to do that, show them in compelling ways and tell them beautiful stories, and also amplify the reporters, the chefs, who create all of this for us and bring that into one place. So at the USA Today Network, a lot of my work had to do with our wine and food experiences, which were in 12 markets, but also aligning what the reporters were doing. So Mark Kurlianchik in Detroit, who's a great restaurant critic there, Liz Barrow in Indianapolis, Deborah Britz in Phoenix, bridging all of that content to amplify what we were doing with our events and how that aligns with what the newspapers were doing and what kinds of stories we presented.
So let's talk about the reach of that. I mean, that's so many publications. How many sort of end viewers, readers, whatever is that?
So you're talking about 109 markets, including USA Today. And then also the larger audience of 100 million viewers and subscribers across the country.
Right.
And so if you take one piece of like how we experience food, and most people experience food by going to restaurants. So and we talk a lot about at the USA Today Network about being able to work with communities. Well, there is no broader or more important community than the restaurant community.
Yeah.
How we eat, where we go,
All
where you
different
take
levels of
your kids, all different levels. That's the center of community from my perspective. So being able to tell stories about communities means telling stories about restaurants and telling stories about how people experience food. So that means bridging all of those reporters,
Yes.
giving them the resources that they need. I worked very closely with the Gannett, New Jersey team, which is 7 newspapers. So, and then newspapers are always shrinking resources. So
Yes, absolutely. I
how
think
do we?
everyone's shrinking resources all the time.
We keep getting smaller.
Right.
But what we were able to do with those 7 newspapers with a very, very small team was tell restaurant stories about the 51 restaurants you absolutely have to go to in New Jersey. And it tells a story not only about restaurants and chefs, but towns and culture, ethnicities, inclusion, all of those things come together. And we told it in different ways, not only for our print subscribers, but for people who come to us on video, for people who come to us on social platforms. Being able to bridge all of those things and tell all of those stories, you can do all of that through restaurants.
And this is amazing. So you were able to have a lot of effect on the narrative around restaurants. What restaurants were deemed worthy of coverage?
And I think that absolutely. And I think we have to, sometimes, especially in media, we drill down to what are the best restaurants. I'm doing air quotes that folks who are listening can't see.
Yeah.
What are the best restaurants? Yeah. I think it's more important to think about the restaurants that matter.
Yes. Let's talk about what does that mean to you? What does matter mean?
It could be a place like Ekiban in Baltimore that has these beautiful steamed buns with a fried chicken thigh.
Baltimore is such a great. I went to school in Baltimore, so I have a particular love for it.
Baltimore is just a great food city.
Yeah,
but it tells this cultural story. So I think restaurants that matter tell a story. They give you a sense of place. They tell you not only about the chef and the story that the chef wants to convey, but also stories about neighborhoods. A restaurant that matters can be a tiny place that just has good shrimp and grits.
Yes.
Or it might be a place where you really only go to get a French 75.
You just went straight to my heart, obviously.
But if that is a gathering place,
right,
and that conviviality speaks to the town, the city, the neighborhood, I think that's a restaurant that matters. It can be a place that has history, or it could be something new that makes people think about, like Ekiban, that how cultures come together and they breathe new life into dishes because of the cultural background of the person who's presenting it. That's something that matters. I think that how we think about which restaurants can not only be the ones that have huge amounts of financial backing.
Right.
A restaurant that
PR team
or an incredible PR team and investors and huge resources, it can be a place that where you just go and get a beautiful croissant. One of my favorite restaurants is called Maketo in Washington D.C.
And you live in Washington,
and I live in Washington, and it's Cambodian and fusion-y, but sometimes I just like to go get a croissant there. To me, it's a restaurant that matters, not only because it's trendy and I think it's one of the best restaurants in Washington, but also because it's a gathering place. It's in a neighborhood that has changed but still has a cultural importance even through gentrification. It's one of the restaurants that came first and has built up its clientele, but is a center of the neighborhood. A restaurant that matters can be a place that's going to anchor retail.
Yes.
We think a lot about starting a new restaurant, but as a lot of big retailers are closing, that center now is a restaurant. People may not, if there's a multi-million-dollar development, they may not be able to buy a luxury scarf, but they might eat at the Shake Shack.
Yes. We're seeing, I'm curious about your feelings. Hudson Yards just happened, and it's a playground for really quite wealthy people. And there's a Shake Shack there. There's very expensive ice cream, like hype beast ice cream that is happening.
Well, and I think that there's the thing is that there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
And there's a place for the Shake Shack. There's a place for the specialty ice cream. And that the thing is that we want to bring people together.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's always a good idea to think, oh, well, that's too fancy, or
Yes.
that's too, or it is removed from people, because we need people. We need tourists.
Yeah.
we need that. So we don't want to alienate those people. And so I think as journalists, being able to tell people, or to be able to tell our audiences how you can experience this in a way that feels comfortable to you. Some people are going to be able to buy everything that they want there. But being able to make sure we address like different kinds of communities. This is a great place for ice cream. Take a date there. This is a place, this is, maybe, take your kids to see the architecture, because it's important to take families to see architecture. You can take them to the Shake Shack. And then helping, a lot of food journalism has to do with telling the story about things to do, how people can spend their time.
And
the
save
food
them
is
money, protect their money.
Protect their money, but also show them that, yes, you can go to this, $5 bill restaurant, but maybe you just want to go eat at the bar and share a plate.
Yes.
You can experience that in a way that is comfortable to you.
Let's talk about that more. There was just an episode of Queer Eye that I saw, and it was a really lovely episode. And there was a woman who, she had sort of lost her feeling of being beautiful, and she was wearing camouflage all the time and all this, and she wanted to go out on a special date night with her husband, and she was deeming these places too fancy. And Anthony did a really lovely thing. He took her to a restaurant and said, let's get that word fancy out of there. Like I always use the word fancy, like semi-ironically. Oh, that's fancy. But he said, how about special?
Yeah.
And let's talk about what special means. I mean, I know that, I've been a food journalist for a decent chunk of time now. And I know that even though I work at Food and Freaking Wine now, and I still have some restaurants that I walk into and think they're going to sniff me out as riffraff and eat. And I think if I am having that barrier to entry, then how must other people be feeling like that? And I always try to put myself in other people's shoes, and make them feel comfortable. I know that there's a restaurant, La Grenouille, that, it's fussy old fancy French. And, and I love it, but I know that I went with a friend of mine, who was just intimidated from the get-go and had sort of an awful experience because she was visiting it with her own discomfort, and so it colored the whole sort of thing. And I just wanted to be like, I don't know, it was just such an upsetting thing to me to see her feel so displaced. I totally understood it.
I had a similar experience. I took a friend to Le Bitar in Tribeca, and she told me later that even though she loved the meal and it was wonderful, and she thought about, gosh, I didn't know that this was for me. And I think I bring a little bit of that to how I approach strategy, dining strategy, is not removing people from what is possible for the idea of what restaurant is for me, because I think everything is for everybody.
Yes.
And I love a fancy restaurant. I love a 5-star restaurant, but I am not above Popeye's chicken.
No one should be. Every chef I know loves Popeyes. They do not think they can make better fried chicken than Popeyes.
I can't. I don't cook meat at home a whole lot, and I certainly cannot fry chicken. But just circling back, that sense of intimidation.
Yes.
I like to peel that back, especially in with how I work with reporters. Not only tell me about the ambiance and the design and the plates, but breaking down the language so that it feels accessible. Accessibility should not be a dirty word.
Yeah.
people should feel like, yes, I want to walk in and not feel like people are going to ask me, can I help you? And not, do you have a reservation?
It should be welcome.
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 I'm glad to see you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so let's unpack the experience then. You said you took your friend to Abbott Arden, and we were sort of off camera talking about the fact that I happen to know the front of house person there he's my brother. He is family to me. He and his wife are family to me, and I always say the reason that his hospitality is so good, even though he was John Winterman was the maitre d' at Danielle for a very long time and at all of Danielle Balut's restaurants, and worked for Charlie Trotter and Gary Danko and stuff. He never forgets he's from Indiana.
Yeah. And we were talking off camera about how every time I go to Batar, because I like to take friends there, it's sort of
that
that's
makes
the
me so
place
happy.
that I like to take people for their birthday. It's always welcome back, and I'm so glad to see you again. And then my friends feel so special there, and a friend of mine who maybe 10 years ago wouldn't have felt as if a restaurant like that was for her, can walk in and not only feel welcome, but think, yes, I should absolutely treat myself to dinner here.
Yes.
Every time I come to New York, absolutely, I deserve that. That's special. That's going to be the thing that I do for myself. And I think that that's something that food can bring us, this bit of joy. Even if you save all your money and you only go once a year, that's the time that you go.
It's so important, and I think for all different ways of feeling comfortable. I so vividly remember. So my mother's disabled and has a lot of physical problems, and my parents were coming to my my grad school thesis show upstate, and they had wanted to stay at this particular place. They'd been so excited about it, and they have a dress code for the dining room. But my mother, that she can't really much walk anymore, but at the time she was having to wear athletic shoes. And so, because that was what was comfortable for her. And my dad said ahead of time, like, hey, look, my wife has these mobility issues. She's going to have to wear that. And they said, well, she can eat in her room. And the fact that there wasn't accommodation for a different kind of body in there broke me. And he had some things to say about that, and got back to them and said, well, have you heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act and all these things? They offered a free night or something, and he was like, well, I'm never coming back to your establishment. So
that's not the answer.
And they said they were training their staff after that.
Fair enough.
But I think as we as journalists ideally empower people to go out to restaurants more and say, this is for you. This is, people from your community. The people who work at restaurants are not fancy people.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that we have to remember as we think about equity and inclusion. One of my favorite places in Washington is a Starbucks. It's the Signing Starbucks.
Oh, tell me why this is.
So I live in a neighborhood that has a huge deaf population because of Gallaudet University, which is essentially like the Harvard for deaf and hearing impaired people. And so there's a Starbucks nearby where it is all signing.
Oh, I've read about this. I think at Extra Crispy we did a story about this.
It is one of my favorite places because it challenges the ideas of equity and inclusion and challenges people in the neighborhood to learn a little bit of ASL. So it's not just about the coffee. It's about living in a community where that a lot of people cannot hear you.
Right.
And so how you react to people if they don't say good morning, it may be not because they're rude, it may be because they can't hear you.
Right.
And that location, I think, has brought so much to our community because not only does it serve part of our community, but it makes our community so much more inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important as we think about how, especially as journalists, how do we include people? How do we think about language equity? Are we presenting our information in ways that's accessible, not just by platform, but by different kinds of people? And are we taking that information to communities that may not have a relationship with us? And so I think about some of my work at the USA Today Network really made me think about, we have a huge changing demographic population, and we have to start now thinking about how are we going to serve communities that are going to be non-white by 2043, I think is the year.
Yes.
And it's happening very, very fast. And as media organizations have to be more inclusive, whether that is in language or ethnicity or
Hiring,
race, color,
clearly.
gender. And our hiring, we've got some
So much
some
work to
do. And I think we have to be more open and not just saying, oh, we're making strides, because yeah, you're always making strides, but what does that mean? Does the information, does the content you create work in a way for different kinds of communities? Or have you considered how other communities are going to receive that information? And is the audience that you have the audience that you want? And in the future, is the audience that you need, will they have a relationship with you to make your path forward in the future possible? And so, circling back, it's a little bit of a tangent.
It all comes together.
But when you walk into a restaurant and you feel like it's for you,
Yeah.
you create a relationship at that moment. And so when you create that relationship and you think, wow, this is a place that I really love, I'm going to bring my dear friend here from her birthday.
The bringing people thing is
You
huge.
bring people along.
Yes.
And so it's a little bit metaphorical, but I think we do the same thing as journalists. I'm going to share this article with you that Atlantic 57 put together about the World Food Program. And you're going to learn more about what we do. And oh my gosh, this is interesting. And oh, you also have this renewal project, and that has to do with food also. I'm bringing more people in. I'm bringing my community with me. It's a good metaphor for how we bring people to the table. I just want to have some people over. We're going to have lemon tarts and French 75s.
Oh my gosh, you made my perfect menu right here, because I think people sort of have leaned too much on the food brings people together without sort of unpacking what that means. Who gets to sit at the table? Who built the freaking table?
Built the table.
Yeah, who's making the food? All of this kind of stuff. And I think we're in a state of disassembly and reassembly right now. And I think that it's so important. It's way overdue. And I think we have to sit in the discomfort of that in a way and not make a lot of people work too hard who have been doing the work all along.
We bring people to the table.
Yeah.
But have you asked them what they brought?
Yeah.
Have you asked them about their dish? Have you asked them if they want to help and what they could possibly bring? I'm being metaphorical again, but I really do think as we think about that, and especially as we think about diversity and inclusion and wanting to be more open, and we want to help build relationships with different kinds of communities, we have to put people not only in positions where they can sit at the table, but they are going to bring something to the table, and they're going to tell you about their dish, and they're going to tell you what they want to serve in the future.
Yes.
I think that has to be the path. It's not enough to say, oh, yeah, we're going to bring people to the table.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've been saying that for a really, really, really long time. But what action comes after that? I'm a very what comes after that kind of person.
The what's next?
We've built this strategy. Well, what's the thing that comes after that?
Because otherwise it's just lip service. It's just a Band-Aid kind of thing. And you've done a lot of work with the James Beard Journalism Committee. about
Yeah.
I love we were sort of we were ships in the night
It's
on
true.
that, and you were coming in as I was leaving, and I was so happy that you were coming there because you have a big influence on. When I was in the committee, people would say, like, why wasn't this story nominated? Why wasn't that story nominated? How about this piece? People didn't know you had to self-nominate, that it cost money to do so. They sort of thought that it was a mysterious process that we were
Absolutely.
trying to make more transparent, and often failed at the fact that stuff has to be nominated, that you have to make certain dates for it. There are certain criteria for inclusion, that it costs a fair amount of money toward it. So there would be people who had great stories to tell who just didn't know the process of it, and had to suffer from the expense of it, and also didn't know that they were welcome. And that was
Right.
a big failing on the part of the committee that we're trying to do. But you talk about what you have done since you've gotten there, because
Sure.
it's changed in some really meaningful ways.
Sure. So I've been on the journalism committee for 2 years now, and I had been associated with the James Beard Foundation in a number of ways, from being nominated for awards and had teams who had won awards. But more broadly, being on the committee is the seat at the table.
Yeah.
It's not only having influence over the criteria of the awards, but it's also thinking about, well, how can we be more equitable? This year, and the nominees for the journalism and the media awards will be announced on March 27th. But this year, we had a period of 2 weeks where we waived the fees for first-time entries. So not only could people self-nominate, and maybe they had a story that that they thought, I really believe in this, and boy, it was shared thousands of times on social. And being able to open that door for people and say, well, I know you're a freelancer and you probably don't make a lot of money, and perhaps you didn't earn a lot of money for this story. We are going to make it possible for that, so that you can nominate and bring you into the organization. And I think that that's really important. And it's also changed in some meaningful ways about not only having a more diverse journalism committee, and that means you have influence over the judges, and thinking about, well, I think this person who has this incredible background in video could be a good judge, or this person who has a really interesting background in nutrition might be somebody that we want to bring into the organization. And that makes a huge difference. We see that with the academies in other genres, in film and in music. When you have a more diverse population of people who are in the academy, it facilitates more diverse awards. It's not rocket science. And I think last year, in 2018, you really saw some change. Michael Twitty winning 2 awards.
I was sitting next to Mayuk.
Mayuk Sin. Or even somebody like Mayuk Sin, who is just a brilliant, beautiful writer, and
so
young.
Oh my gosh.
He is going to be able to offer
what a
us
superstar.
brilliant writing for years to come. And being a James Beard Award winner gives him even more cachet.
Yeah. That's a platform you can stand on for the rest of your life. It is not a small thing winning one of these. This is a jury of your peers. And increasingly, I will say, before, it might not have been. It wasn't. We're building toward a piece where it is an actual jury of your peers,
and that takes work.
Yeah,
it takes work. It is not an overnight process.
Yeah.
I like to say it's a process, not an event. It will take more, and it will take a few more years. But we don't want for 2018 to be a one-off, and that this was the year where you had a lot of Black and brown people who won awards. But that is a process to bring people in the organization, and we can continue to grow. And this year, I think it's okay to say that we had a record number of entries.
Good.
And I think that that's really important, and we will continue to grow. Last year, somebody like Baxter Holmes from ESPN won the Feature Reporting Award for his article on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, how that fuels the NBA.
Yes.
A story like that, maybe 5 years ago, I think it's fair to say that story not only would not have been nominated because of the awareness that his editor had about, this is a really good food story, you should nominate this for a James Beard Award. And Baxter Holmes said, I don't even know what that is. First time entry, and he won the damn thing.
Yes.
And that shows the importance of like how we can bridge communities, that food touches every single sector of the economy and lifestyle and every organism in our landscape. And so if we can connect those people and let people know and be more transparent about what we do and who we are. And so it's been very thrilling for me to see the change and to be associated with the awards and for other people to say, oh, yes, my video about gentrified greens from the root is something that I should think about nominating, and me having a presence, I think, on the committee helps that because they see me as an authority of, well, do you think this could win? Well, I don't know, but why don't we put it in front of our peers and bring more people into the organization? We have to keep bringing people to the table, and we have to keep the doors open.
So we had been talking beforehand, and you just said it about, like, you had question in your voice when you said they look at me as an authority, and you sort of like were looking at yourself like, so we were talking about imposter syndrome before. Like, the thing is that the moment I met you, which was after one of these things, I was thinking, like, this woman knows the secret. She can see through the matrix. Like, she knows all of the things and how it works, and you have this strategy brain. But you yourself, you've had to fight and to get that place and be. It's a constant process. Can you talk about what that must feel like and how damn tired you must be?
It's exhausting. And the interesting thing about imposter syndrome is this idea that you're not supposed to be there. I don't have that. Issue.
I do that. I have that constantly.
I know.
Why am I hosting this podcast?
I know who Jamila is. I'm very confident in who I am, and I am very aware of what I bring to the table. I do have, and I always have to tell people, I need you to stay with me while I tell you how my brain works. I have an ability to see through lines in ways that I think really, it sets me apart from other editors.
It's really amazing, because I remember we were walking to this party, and I forget the specificity of like what we were talking about, but you were playing like 10-dimensional chess with this thing, and I was just thinking, I just wanted to crawl in there and understand sort of how the dimensionality of how you approach these things.
It's almost as if finding my brain kind of works in like, I'd like to think of everything as a wheel, and if our content is the wheel, what are the spokes that come out of that, and then how do we keep that wheel turning and adding more spokes? So that's sort of like the electricity of my brain. But I'm also an introvert. And I fight that too. I'm constantly fighting with my introvert.
I'm an ambivert, so I sort of jazz up for things like this, and then I go home and like have to sit in the dark for a while.
Yeah, I have to sit in the dark, and sometimes, and I need a extraordinary amount of solitude.
Same. Because
my brain is always working, and sometimes I need to turn it off a little bit. The problem with that, and where the imposter syndrome comes in, is that I know who I am, but getting other people to see it and get that buy-in of me coming into a room and saying, okay, I got this idea. And it's all formed in my head. And I know exactly how it's going to work, and the resources I need, and the people and the platforms. It's harder showing other people how that process works, and then getting other people to believe in you.
Is that because they're not used to hearing this from somebody with your face?
I think that's fair. I think I don't know that for sure, but it's something that comes into my brain. Like, oh, who does this little black girl think she is?
If only they freaking knew who you were and how lucky they are to be in your presence.
I mean, fortunately, I have been surrounded by incredible people who believed in me.
Yeah.
Whether that was the late great Bob Magruder, who was the managing editor of the Detroit Free Press, who said,
Tell me about him.
Oh, was just a light, and he was the person. He walked the walk on diversity. He was somebody who said, oh, well, if we don't have enough Black journalists, we're just going to grow some, whether that was in college or making sure that people had access to.
That's amazing.
Had access to internships and made the Free Press available to. I grew up in Detroit, and
I didn't know that.
And so the Detroit Free Press high school journalism program, of which people Jamel Hill is also an alumni, and John Elajon at the New York Times. And gosh, I didn't expect to be talking about Bob Magruder because it's. And he hasn't been with us for a really, really long time, but I think about him all the time. And I think about how he said to me when I was in college, this work is going to require a lot of sacrifices on your behalf, but it's a great place to be in. Just believe in, you've got the talent, you just believe in it. And the other thing, and I talk about this all the time, he said to me, it's the thing I think about, and whenever I'm teaching or working with students, he said, opportunity doesn't knock on your personal timeline.
Oh.
You have to be ready, even if you don't think you are. And it's something that I've always carried with me when I've seen something in front of me, and I think about, well, I don't know. And I hear his voice saying in the background, opportunity doesn't knock on your personal timeline. Thinking of it like, and that's a kind of imposter syndrome. Oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
We as women do that?
Yep, we do that. We do that. I'm not ready.
I think like the job I currently have, I wouldn't. It came about in a sort of strange way because I was coming from within the company. I'd already been working with food and wine, and they kind of created a position for me because the publication I was working for was going a different way. If I had seen it, I wouldn't have applied for it because I wouldn't think I was qualified. And I was so lucky to have people who could sort of pull the threads of the things I do and make something that was right for me that I could serve in. But I have, so much of that thing that if I had seen the description of it, I would think I'm not qualified for that. I haven't done print before. I had digital pretty down pat. I thought like podcasts, I thought I can talk to people, but print, like, no. And I would think like, why would anybody want me to do this? And it was sort of like I had to say yes and jump into the abyss.
Imagine what it's like if we could say yes to everything, where we could start checking off that. And sometimes it's just a matter of knowing the right lingo and being able, I always like to think about being able to talk. It's almost like talking in another language with no accent. Content strategist. What does that even mean? I'm a journalist who helps people figure out what platforms they need to use.
Yeah.
And to me, it's very simple, but some of the language we use can become so intimidating, especially women and people of color, where you think, I don't know if I could do that. Or
Chad would do it.
Or Chad would do it, and Chad would probably feel totally fine, like, oh yeah, I'll figure it out. And we don't allow ourselves the ability, the time and the space to say, oh yeah, I'm 90% there. I can figure this other stuff out. Or these are the things I absolutely don't want to do. So I'm going to do this much bigger thing over here because I don't really want to figure that. That's like, that sounds like nonsense. I think we don't allow like our brains to think about what's the biggest thing that we can do, what's the biggest thing that we can offer, and all the little things that the checklist and the job description. Being able to think about how you want to carry media forward is a much bigger thing than just the checking the box and saying, oh, can I do a social media strategy? Distribution channels. Yeah.
I always say there's lots of you can learn. Like there's some things that you have, and there are things that can be taught. And and if you're you have employers or whatever who see that thing, that light, that thing that you can do, you can figure out some of the other stuff.
You can learn, or you can create it. Think about it. A lot of the jobs that exist now in media didn't exist 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Social media strategist, social media manager, that job literally did not exist.
Yeah.
And so we call them different things, but really that's about delivery. Is how do you get this piece of information to people? And so, a podcast, I want to sit and talk to people. I want to create a show. OTT, over the top streaming.
Okay, you said OTT, and I wasn't sure what that meant.
Over the top streaming is essentially Netflix.
Okay.
It's the Netflixification of television. I want to have a show, or I want to do 8 episodes. But if I come to you and I say, and I write in a job description, needs experience with OTT, and then you got to get to the Google. What does that even mean?
Right.
But if I say, can develop a new series for video, a new video series, has ideas about a show.
Yeah.
Then you're going to get something like Under Pressure. You can start thinking about what is the content that actually matters.
Yeah.
And not this checklist. And that's a different kind of thinking. And I think we have to empower young people, women of color, women and people of color, to be able to think about what their ideas are and what other things that they can bring, and not just be able to say, yeah, I know how to write a script.
I think that's so valuable because, I look at job listings for things, and so and I again, because I think, like, what would I be intimidated by? What wouldn't I? And I see ways that things could be written in a totally different way that would invite such a bigger base. And I was actually talking with a friend recently, and she's got a lot of physical issues, and deals with a lot of pain, and basically has to work laying down. And she's got an incredible brain, and an incredible storytelling ability, and knack to getting to the heart of the matter, speaking fluently with chefs and all this stuff. But she's worried that she's counted out because physically being in an office is difficult for her. And I was thinking, I know you, and I know your brain, and she was afraid to even have a conversation with a workplace about saying, like, I would need my needs accommodated to work for you. I was Yashar Ali just had a thread on Twitter. I don't know when this is airing, but this was recent, and I felt so understood by it. It was about ADHD, which I was diagnosed with last year, and it was almost word for word of my experience with it, and talking about seeing all the possibility in a glass case that you don't have the key for and stuff. But he was saying he was taking on a new possibility, and he had to tell the people up front, look, I can't be in an open plan office, and because it's so hard to get work done there too. But I think accommodating people with different brains is important.
Different brains, different capabilities.
Yeah.
I suffer. I have pain as well.
Okay, let's talk.
So I stand at work, and being able to sit all day or go to meetings all day, that can be challenging. And I think we have to open up the possibilities that we should, as leaders, we should be asking people, what do you need? Not only, okay, what kind of stories are you going to bring us?
What are you going to do for me?
What do you need? What kind of barriers do we have that we can break down to make your job easier, make your life easier? Do you need more time off? Do you need a closed space? Do you need to stand up at work? Do you just need to have headphones on all day and not feel as if people aren't participating?
Right.
We have to think about when we think about inclusion is also just what people's needs are. it's that individualism I think is really important, and it helps us build better teams.
Oh my God, the stories you're going to get out of that too are going to be so much better. And
Absolutely.
so you had been talking about like the saying yes to. Now, something that you and I talk a lot offline about is what we have to say no to, because we do both deal with a lot of physical issues these days. If you're comfortable talking about this,
We'll see where that goes.
okay. Yeah, but so we both have conditions that can be painful to be in our bodies. Yeah, and I've had to really drill down on what I say yes to and what I feel no to, and deal with the fear of, if I say no to this, are people just absolutely going to discount me, forget about my work? I didn't go to this, or am I going to be off people's radar? People going to think I'm no fun because like I can't drink right now because, because I have to leave the party early because I feel like hell. All of these things, and still feeling okay and like a participant if I say no to things.
Not only if I say no, but the challenge I would have is feeling as if I had to explain to people
It gets exhausting.
why I was in pain.
Yeah.
And I tend to overshare.
Me too.
and then there are moments I'm like, oh man, why did I tell them that? Because they're going to think that I'm incapacitated and I can't work and I can't do.
Yeah.
And
you and I both do the work.
and we work really, really hard. But I found that by not telling people that I was in pain all the time, it put me at a disadvantage, because if I just didn't want to be bothered or people got on my nerves, it was because I was in excruciating pain. And until I had surgery and I had some other things happen, that I was able to manage that. And then when I started telling people, they were so much more accommodating.
Yes.
They were so open and thanked me for my transparency. So it taught me that we have to communicate and we have to tell people what our needs are, up to the degree that that feels comfortable.
Yeah, you have to. It's different in every situation. Some people don't want to hear it. Some people just need to know there's something. They don't want to know the specifics.
Right.
I mean,
but I think even as leaders, we don't really need to know all the information.
Yeah.
If someone comes to me and says, I just need some time off,
yeah.
I am going to find the space, because the work is going to get done.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we have to be, and it taught me to be more open about the pain that I was in, because I was suffering in silence for years.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not suffering with this alone. And I think we were hospitalized either.
It was right around each
around
other.
the same time, and being able to check in and say, hey, how are you feeling today?
I can't tell you how much that mattered to me, to have somebody else who understood it, and somebody who is as hard driving and achieving as you, because I think of you almost, you're a woman in motion. And because I think most of the times that I physically see you, you're somewhere and everybody wants a piece of you, and physically in motion. And it's, I had been feeling great shame, because I felt like I couldn't achieve enough, because, my particular stuff, so much of it is, it's female stuff, or female, or, it's, endometriosis. And then I have a gut condition called SIBO. So folks know what that is.
Google it.
yeah. And it's, I talk pretty openly about it as well. But I had feeling, it's an intimate pain, and I felt really mortified about it. But the fact that somebody like you, who was still doing the work and still doing all the stuff, you were taking care of yourself, and that gave me permission to take a beat and take care of myself.
Well, you gave me permission, because I had figured out in my head, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this surgery, and I'm going to be back in 6 weeks. And you said, pause and take care of yourself.
I should have taken more time.
And you said that I should have taken more time.
I did, yeah.
And I needed more time, because I had a pretty radical surgery and pretty radical condition, and just needed a lot of treatment.
Yeah.
But you saying, I wish I had more time.
Yeah.
And then having the support of my workplace saying, take the time that you need. It's okay. And I think that gave me the runway to not only to heal, but to continue to not feel embarrassed about what was happening to me. Because I think, if I'm honest, I was embarrassed by it.
Same.
And I didn't want to say, oh, my girl parts don't work. I felt very embarrassed, and I didn't. And then my introvert is like, why are you telling people that?
Because
they
it's
don't
a gift.
need to know.
No, so you're giving them a gift. You're giving them the gift of then their, anything that they have that they are not feeling okay about. It opens it up. It's an act of generosity. Vulnerability is generosity.
Absolutely. Being more vulnerable. I mean, because if you can't be vulnerable, you can't have joy.
Yeah.
And you can't be helpful. And then I found that when people found out what happened to me, I was able to arm them with information that they wouldn't have had. Like, oh, if you want to have this procedure, you need to be sedated for it. Don't let them tell you that it's going to be uncomfortable. No, it's awful. And if men had to have it, they would put them under.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
and being able to be more open about not only my condition, but the recovery process.
It's
and then the part of getting back to work, because that was really all I wanted. I wanted to get back to work. I wanted to be taken seriously.
It's a self-worth thing.
I wanted to feel like I was doing something when my doctors are like, no, sit down. And I'm like, but I want to write, and I want to video, and I want to skate, and I want to do all of these different things. And they were like, no, you need to sit down.
Yeah.
And that helped me. That time gave me time to get my head back into a space where I could be more productive, and I could be a better journalist. I could be a better leader because I had that time in that space.
Oh, it's so true. I had a friend who had a freak accident. A hot tub cover blew off a roof and smashed her into the sidewalk. Like, sorry to freak everybody out, but that's what happened, and broke her arm, like all this stuff. And she had to have surgery within a couple of days, and she tried to go back to work like the next week.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah, and she left like halfway. She was like, I'm the boss, I need to do this. And they're all like, go home. And that was a great present from the boss to say, like, go home. And she told me, take the time to do it. And I didn't take enough. I should have listened to her even more. I should have taken a few more weeks. The thing that brought me joy was seeing a video of you skating. So you're a figure skater.
I try to be.
Yeah, you have a long history in being a figure skater. Is that... And you're back skating.
I'm back skating. Also teaching Learn to Skate periodically. Hello, Fort DuPont. Hope you're listening. That is something that brings me joy. I don't want to run or lift heavy things, but figure skating is something. It was a gift that I gave to myself when I was 25, which was kind of a long time ago, and because I wanted to learn how to skate backward. I watched Michelle Kwan, and I wanted to be her. She's the skater who got me off the couch and onto the ice, because I was like, I've skated my whole life. I would like to go backward. And I
love it.
Decided I would take lessons, and I just fell in love with it. And once I learned to skate backward, then I learned all the turns, then I learned the jumps, and I started competing. And
that's amazing.
And now that's something that I like to share with other people, that if you can walk, you can skate. And it's also kind of metaphorical about life. If you fall down, you get up. You get up and you keep going. That's like the best lesson, I think, for anything in skating and in life. If you fall down, you get up. You keep yourself centered. If you want to move quickly, you have to stay centered. And that's something I like to share with other people. I prefer teaching primarily adults, because, when you're 6, your parents are going to...
You're made of elastic.
You're made of elastic. Your parents are going to do it. But then when I tell people that, I'm still out here trying to get my axle back, and I'm, running into the walls, and I can't see as well as I used to. So sometimes I hit the wall on a let's jump. And Adam Rippon has a much better layback than I'm ever going to have. and I want to be him.
He was here one day, and I almost freaked
I
out.
would have lost my mind. I was like, "Can you teach me how to get into a good layback?" But it brings me a lot of joy, not only to see that feeling of flying, that feeling of flight, but when you teach someone else to do it and that they learn that, wait a minute, this is not that hard. And if I just add another layer onto it, and I turn my fingers in the right way, it really looks like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
I think that adds so much joy to people's lives. It's sort of like when you cook, when you make something and you sprinkle some parsley over the dish and it just brightens it up. Or if you bake a cake and you tap a little bit of confectioner's sugar over the top of a pound cake, like suddenly it just feels so much more special. That's kind of what skating does for me when I see other people and when I tell them, no, you don't need the rail, and just put your hands out to the sides and think about putting some pressure and bend down, stand up, step, glide. And then they realize that, oh, wait a minute, this is actually easy. And then they're off and skating. And arming them with that stability. Skating is all about stability. And I think it's a good metaphor for journalism. You want to arm journalists with tools so that they can keep telling stories. When I teach skating, I'd like to arm people just with the tools of how to use their edges so they can just keep skating. Even if you never take another lesson, even if you never learn to do back crossovers, being able to just get yourself off the sides of the barrier and into the center of the rink and stand up and keep your head up, that's also a good thing. You have to keep your eyes in front of you. These are lessons that are work in skating and journalism and food and in life.
Oh my God, that is so perfect. I'm getting the wrap it up signal from, I think that is a perfect note for that. So I have some questions for you that I ask everybody. So you're actually the first person who I've interviewed since the podcast aired, so you know some of the questions. So this is the first time. But because you put so much of yourself into nurturing other people and bringing up young journalists and stuff, you get to. I want to ask you, what is the selfish thing you want for yourself? And I want you to say it out loud to the universe so they can get it too. This is, I always say, the sort of Oprah, the secret question. What's the thing you want for you?
The thing I want for Jamila is to keep doing work that she's passionate about. Food is something I'm extraordinarily passionate about because it's not really about the food. It's about life. It's about culture. And I want to continue to tell stories and to help people tell stories about food, life, and culture. It's everything. Recipes are everything. It's the thing I want to continue to have that joy in my life.
That is so lovely. And we have the speed round now.
Okay.
What's your comfort food?
Lemon tarts.
From anywhere particular, or you make them?
I make them.
Is there a recipe that people could find from you? Or?
I make a very basic lemon tart. I could. Why don't I share it on my Twitter profile, which is at Jamila Robinson. It's a very basic. I mean, three quarter cups of lemon, 3/4 cups of sugar, 6 tablespoons of butter. For 2 eggs, 2 egg yolks. That's tart shell.
I want it right now. Oh my God.
Put a little meringue on top.
Oh, that's so perfect. What is the last meal that you had that made you emotional?
The meal that always makes me emotional is whenever I have duck confit.
Ooh, is there a particular place that you had it that made you?
That's something I actually cook at home.
Oh,
I make duck confit at home. It's something when I think about. It's kind of almost like a love story, my relationship with duck confit. I'll leave
pitch
it at
me that story, please.
I will pitch you that story. I will pitch you that story.
Because that sounds, I feel like that's going to be a banger. It's going to be really great. What is the last meal that someone cooked for you, not in a restaurant?
Oh my gosh, my cousin Nichelle made Thanksgiving dinner, and that's always a meal that I always had to cook, and not Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, and she's an amazing cook and a really, really good baker. And
What
it
did
was
she
actually
make?
just all of the basic stuff. It was turkey and dressing and all of that kind of like celebration food.
Yeah.
But it was really nice not having to do it.
It's so great.
And I always think about thinking I need to participate in it, but that's a great thing about family is when people cook things for you.
That's so nice. So what living musician would you want to cook for, and what would you cook for them? This is another thing we're putting it out to the universe. So this person hears it and you get to cook for them.
Oh my gosh. I think so. Seal is my favorite musician, probably favorite singer. And I would cook something that so my favorite song of his is Future Love Paradise. And it goes, but if only you could see them with nope on their faces. Blah. I would probably cook something like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about all of these different dishes that I could make. I would probably make something something that's like a pasta, like a fresh pasta, maybe a cacio e pepe, something simple, because I think his voice he doesn't do a lot of ornamentation. It's very simple. He just sings the song. And there is something about cacio e pepe that is
it's a perfect dish.
It's the perfect dish because it's so simple and it's so straightforward and it's so wonderful and luscious. And I think of that's the thing I think of when I think of his voice. In Parpadelli, of course.
Dear Seal, Jamila would like to cook for you.
Yes.
I hope this happens.
I hope it does too.
Wow.
Oh, wow, that's a great question.
Wouldn't that be that would be so fun? And last question, you have 5 uninterrupted minutes for self-care. What do you do?
Oh, I get my nails done.
Oh.
That is my thing. Manicure, pedicure. That is even if sometimes I like to just go and have the polish changed because it's someone taking care of my hands and making sure they're neat. I used to be a nail biter. That was how I processed my anxiety was by chewing my nails. And that has not only helped me break that habit, but is also my self-care.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Oh my gosh. It's such a joy to be here with you.
I could go on for like 5 more hours with it. And I think you and I are due for lemon tarts and French 75.
Lemon tarts and French 75s anytime.
I think when this airs, we need to be
I think that's a great
together.
idea.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much today to our guest, Jamila Robinson. You can find her on all the socials at Jamila Robinson. You can see her work through the filter of Atlantic 57 and just all over the place. Get to know this woman. And thank you to our producers, Jennifer Martinick, Alicia Cabral, and Amy Frank. Thanks to Douglas Wagner for our delightful theme song. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend, write a review, or rate us. If there's something you would like us to talk about or a guest you'd like to hear more from, please let us know. And you can find me on Twitter at @KittenWithAWhip. Find out more about the show and catch up on all the episodes at foodandwine.com, Food and Wine's YouTube page, and all the platforms. Thanks for listening and take good care of yourself until the next time.